Hello and welcome back to the Trick Play Podcast. I'm Simon Chiskovsky and I'm here with Caleb Peterson, and shortly we'll be breaking down all of the sports-related news, rumors, and drama that you will want to hear about. In this episode, we'll be talking about our thoughts on free agency so far in both the NBA and the NHL. Then we'll move on to the shocking performance in the MLB. That was 3,969 days in the making, and why the NFL is blaming its own players for the slippery state of the field in last year's Super Bowl. Caleb, are you ready to get into it?
Absolutely.
So obviously, like we talked about a little bit last week, there's already been quite a few big signings in the NHL, and obviously the NBA as well, which is what I mentioned in the intro, but we'll get into that later. I figure we'll start off with probably one of the bigger ones, at least on this list that I've got right here, and Ryan O'Reilly, who went to the Nashville Predators, which is definitely an interesting one, Caleb. I don't know about you, but he has the potential to be the center that team has been missing for God knows how long. It could be a big factor for them next year.
No, it's true. It's obviously whenever you get a player like Ryan O'Reilly, it's a very good piece to have. For me, I just think the interesting part about it is the fit that he has with the team. For me, Nashville is an interesting team because they were on the fringe last year, and you kind of think they're on their way out of contention. But when they make a move to get a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, that kind of speaks to them still having some sort of championship ambition, right? Because that was the same move the Leafs did last year, right? He was brought in to help them win a championship. He's got championship experience in St. Louis, tried to bring that to Toronto, obviously didn't quite work out, and now he's going to Nashville, which I just think is an interesting fit. I think obviously a good player. I'm just wondering what the intention is in signing him there.
Yeah, for sure. And when you first mentioned fit, I thought that was interesting because I thought you were going to take that in a different direction. Because I think when I think of Ryan O'Reilly, I think that he's the type of player who could fit well on almost any team. But I also definitely agree with you on the fact that it's an interesting signing for the Predators. And I remember even thinking that when it happened because obviously not exactly a team that looks like they're going to win a Stanley Cup next year. But if they put him on a line with Philip Forsberg, if they set up decent offense next year, they could potentially be a contender next year. It'll be interesting to see what they can do.
It'll definitely be interesting. I just can't say that I have a whole lot of faith. Because after Forsberg and O'Reilly, who do you really have after that, right? Like, looking at their lineup, like, even just getting to the second line, it already looks pretty lacking in depth. You've got, like, Kiefer Sherwood on the wing, Thomas Novak at center, Luke Evangelista on the right wing. Like, I haven't heard of most of those guys. It's kind of it'll definitely be interesting because a lot of the moves that I saw Nashville making was selling off parts of their core and trying to rebuild, whereas this move kind of goes against the grain in that way. So I don't know if they would even be quite contender status after this move. It just speaks that they think that they can be championship contender status, where I don't really know if that's the right way to take it, unless it's looking like longer down the road they want to have Ryan O'Reilly, because correct me if I'm wrong, but this deal is 4 years long. So is it more for the end of the deal than the start of the deal? That's kind of what I would be thinking.
Well, I'm definitely going to need a refresher on how old Ryan O'Reilly is because I was under the impression he's
32.
Not exactly in the
32.
Oh, okay, never mind. He's younger than I thought he was. Okay. 32 is not bad. He'll be 36 at the end of that contract. But you did mention their lineups, which you have a good point. Their offense definitely isn't nothing pretty. It has potential. They've got a couple of young guys in the bottom half of it, but it's definitely not bad. When I look at the Preds, their strong point is definitely their defense because, I mean, Roman Josi, Ryan McDonough, Tyson Barrie. That's a pretty solid top three. Luke Shannon there. He's not bad either. Like, they've got a pretty decent lineup there. And obviously they have Juuso Saros. Sorry, I slipped on that for some reason. And that's not when I look at a team like that, I'm thinking, like, that's a very solid team. Probably first-round exit at best, but they're definitely a playoff team. I can definitely say that when I look at a lineup like that.
I don't know. I really don't think they're a playoff team right now. Like,
you don't think so?
No. You can't be a playoff team if you can't score. And other than that first line,
true.
I don't think they're going to score any goals. Because this is kind of what we saw.
They definitely need a couple breakout players.
They really do, and this is kind of what we saw with the Flames last year, right? Where it's like good on defense, like the Sutter style of defense works. We limited people to like a low amount of goals, but we couldn't get any on our end. Ended up losing more games than we won and missing the playoffs. It seems like it would be a similar story to Nashville.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with you. So, obviously, we've got a lot of people on this list to get to. Let's cut this off here. What would you, if you were to give a grade to this move for the Predator, what do you think you'd give?
For the Ryan O'Reilly, I'd give it like a... It's not terrible in terms of, like, how much they're paying for him, right? Because he is a, like, not top-tier star, but, like, I'd say mid-tier star. And they're paying
sure.
only like it's 18 million over 4 years. That's not too bad. So if this deal works out in the way that I think Nashville hopes it does, to where he's more beneficial for them in the future, then I can be like my opinion on this deal can improve. But for now, I'm kind of sticking on the low end. I'd give it like a B minus, just because I think it's a great player, and it's a good deal for him. I just don't think it's the right fit at the right time.
Okay, I definitely don't disagree with any point you made there. I think I'd put it a little bit higher just because I think as a team, this shows what the Predators are looking towards. They're not looking at selling. Obviously, you pointed that out earlier. This is obviously a pretty big buying move, but I think I'd give it a B plus just because they did exactly what anybody team that's buying would want to do. They picked up a new star center. He'll hopefully be pretty solid for them, and obviously we'll have to see how that works out for them. I think I'd probably give it a B plus, not much higher than you gave it, but I think I'd definitely give them a little bit more credit because obviously if you want to look at how much Ryan O'Reilly's probably going to add to that team, just think about how people are talking about the Leafs and how different they'll be without Ryan O'Reilly, right? That's the way that I'm kind of looking at it. I think that it is a move that is pretty solid for the Predators, but it's only if you look at it as them buying, which how good they'll be next year, even with them, is up in the air. So we'll see. But right now, I'd probably give it a B plus. But other than that, I think we can probably move on to the next one guy. I don't know about you. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, let's keep at the top of this list. Let's go Blake Wheeler. What do you think on that move?
For Blake Wheeler, honestly, that is a great signing for the Rangers. That's a very low risk, potentially high reward kind of signing. Because the term, it's a 1 year signing. It's very much a kind of prove yourself deal after Winnipeg bought him out, I believe. And it's exactly what the Rangers need at this point. The Rangers are just on the cusp of contention. They've got a lot of young prospects that haven't quite developed, and like if any of them hit in the next couple of years, then that can take them over the top. Like looking at Capo Caco and Lafreniere, if either of those guys hit, then like I think the Rangers can be in solid cup contention with the rest of the roster they have. The one thing that I would say that is not as good for this deal is you could say like they've tried this before and it doesn't exactly work. With the signings of Kane and Tarasenko, they still weren't able to get past the first round, even with all that veteran like championship depth. They still weren't able to make it past the first round. But I still think it's worth a shot on Blake Wheeler just because it's such a cheap deal. It's $800,000. It's basically chump change in the NHL.
Yep.
So it's worth.
Well, it is chump
yeah,
change.
it's worth the flyer on it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I would never disagree with you on that. I think picking up a guy like Blake Wheeler for $800K in any situation is exactly what any team would possibly want. Having a veteran guy like that, he's been on good teams. He's been on teams that have won. He's a guy who you can basically slide him in anywhere on that right wing side and on any line, and you will be perfectly fine. I think the Rangers are obviously going to try and slide him in that top two because obviously I think he'll probably either be playing with Chris Kreider or Panarin. I think because they're both left wingers, right? I got that right? I think I got that right. Anyway, he'll either be playing with one of the two and probably have a pretty good opportunity to have a pretty solid year next to one of them, as long as he doesn't regress. We'll have to see what happens with that. But even if he does, I mean, picking up a regressing player at 800K, I don't think anybody's going to care too much.
Yeah, you can cut.
But I definitely don't disagree with you. Great deal.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Like you can if he regresses, you can cut your losses on that like super fast. You move on, and then it's okay. And then even if he has like an amazing season, it's also not that big of an investment to keep him around because he's already an aging player, and I don't think there would be that much competition for his services. So it kind of works out perfectly in both directions, right?
Yep. And even if he does regress, putting him on a fourth line, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, this is a team that's looking to contend, despite losing some veteran stars in Kane and what was it?
Tarasenko?
Tarasenko. Why did that slip? I don't know why that slipped my mind anyway. But they still are a very solid team, like you pointed out. They've got pretty much no holes anywhere as far as I can see. Obviously, they are looking to improve as it wasn't enough last year, but who knows? Maybe they'll have more luck this year. But since we've got a lot of names to go through here, what grade would you give it, you think?
I'm going to give it an A right now. And the only thing keeping me from giving it any higher is just it does have a limited ceiling, right? It's not going to be a player that'll change your franchise around. It's just like a smart, savvy business move. Which will get for me like a solid A. Definitely a great move.
Yep. And I definitely agree with you. I think that it's an A as well. I don't think, for all the exact same reasons, I'm just going to basically repeat the same thing you said. Obviously, the upside isn't crazy on this. They're getting a 36-year-old player who knows how good he'll actually be next year, because obviously, aging player, he could decline, he probably will decline. Whether he can maybe pull one more star level season, if that, we'll have to see. But even if he doesn't, it's high, or medium risk, low reward, right? It's an A. I would give it an A for the Rangers, for sure. And if we just want to keep moving down this list, we have Matt Duchene to the Dallas Stars, which I believe, off the top of my head, you might have to, Caleb, I don't know if you have the numbers on this pulled up, but if you do, you can correct me on this. I think it's $3 million.
Yeah,
right?
That seemed about right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is 1 year, $3 million.
Okay. Obviously, right away, I think for almost the exact same reason as the Blake Wheeler, I can say that this is, when I saw this, I thought this was a great move by the Dallas Stars. It's a guy who has put up a lot of points in previous seasons, and he's been very successful on every team he's been on, really. I think it's a great guy to potentially slide in anywhere on that Dallas Stars lineup. We'll have to see where he ends up. They've got a pretty, if I remember correctly, pretty solid forward core all the way down. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll get in that top two. We'll have to see. But I think it's a great move.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's kind of the thing, it's interesting going from the O'Reilly deal to this one, because it's kind of a similar move, right? It feels like a move to bring in a guy to put you over the edge. Now, the difference is, what I didn't like the O'Reilly deal as much is because Nashville is not in the position to make that kind of move. Dallas, on the other hand, is, and especially Matt Duchene as a player, you look at where he came from, Nashville, right? Like, Nashville, I think, made the right move by buying out Matt Duchene, right? It's the time where you need to reset and the time where you need to start stocking up draft picks and getting capital for some of your stars, although in Matt Duchene's case, obviously, because I think he had a pretty huge behemoth of a contract. You almost had to cut dead weight on that one. But for the Stars, it's picking up a guy like Matt Duchene makes a lot more sense than for a team like the Predators, just because of the situation you're in. Because definitely, like you said, Simon, like the Stars forward group is insanely good. There's a reason they go as far as they do every year, because I think they have a lot of guys that aren't as much big names, like Rupe Hentz is who immediately comes to mind, and Pavelski, who was a big name, but people write him off because of his age. It's these players that have become subtly underrated that take Dallas all the way to the Western Conference Final last year, to a Stanley Cup Final a few years ago, when a lot of people wouldn't have predicted them to get that far, at all at the start of the playoffs or at the start of the season. And I feel like Matt Duchene can be another one of those players because, well, he in his heyday he was talked about and was definitely a big name among the stars of the NHL. Well, he still kept up good production. I just don't think he's quite in that same level of the conversation anymore. So I think Dallas is a really good fit for him to kind of fit in alongside those depth pieces or those really good scoring depth pieces that they have, and hopefully make an impact there to get Dallas finally kind of over the hump that they've been in, reaching the conference finals and Stanley Cup finals and not being able to win one yet.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that when I look at a move like this, I'm looking at, again, and I can say this about a lot of moves this offseason so far, and I'm sure I will, low risk, high reward. When you're paying a guy like Matt Duchene $3 million, obviously the high reward here is you can expect probably like a 60-point season out of him. But the thing is, when you're paying someone as low as $3 million, if Matt Duchene falls off and only puts up like a 40-point season, that's not even the end of the world. That's still great for a third, fourth liner. You cannot complain about that for a guy of the role that he'll have. That's the thing that immediately comes to mind when I think of a move like this. It's perfect for a contender like Dallas. I personally think that this is a great move for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like it's another move that fits in right alongside the Blake Wheeler move for New York, and just how it's a perfect fit with a player who still has a lot of potential and a little bit of juice left in the tank, that may be a little bit undervalued just because of age and how sometimes the contracts that players are in make them seem worse than they are, because they were so overvalued at one point in terms of how much money they were paid. Like Matt Duchene before was way overpaid for the production that he had. He was being paid like a top 10 star, and well, he's really good. He wasn't quite that, and so I think it's the same kind of thing where that kind of lowers the market on him to a certain extent. So when a team can come in and swoop him up, I think it's a really smart, savvy move to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. And we can cut this one off. Just put another grade. You want to give yours first?
Yeah, sure. I think I'd hesitate between going A- to A. I'm still gonna lean towards A just because I really like the team and player fit. It is a little bit more money than the Blake Wheeler deal, which again I think is comparable, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's enough to really budge the needle for me, so I'd still stick with A. Like, I think it's a really good signing.
Yeah, for sure, and I agree with everything that you just said there. I was about to say the exact same thing. I agree with A. I would give it the same thing as the Blake Wheeler trade. I think that they're both signing. I think they're both very, very similar moves. Obviously, $800K, $3 million. There's a little bit of a difference there, but I don't think it's enough to truly matter. And honestly, getting a player like Duchene for $3 million, nobody's complaining. So I think it's a great move for them. I think it's an A as well. I think that one's a pretty safe one there. And if we want to keep moving on down the list we have here, next up we have Connor Brown, who went to the Edmonton Oilers to rejoin his Erie Otters. Yeah, McDavid played for the Erie Otters. Rejoined his ex-Erie teammate, Connor McDavid, which is an interesting one to me. That's another player who still decently young, but never really broke out necessarily. It's an interesting move.
It definitely is, and it's a bit of a risky one, and just because of the injury history, right? Coming off of the ACL injury last year, it does stink a little bit of a very much motivated by Connor McDavid type move, and it just feels like for the Oilers it's just not quite enough. Like, even if this works out to the fullest extent, it feels like it's not quite enough of a move, because they've had such high expectations for the last however long McDavid and Draisaitl have been playing at their peak, and it just feels like they need a little bit more to move the needle, if you know what I mean. It just does. I'm not saying it's bad in a vacuum. I just feel like I need a little bit more.
Do you have how much money they paid him?
Let me see. I can get that pretty quick.
Okay.
They-
Well, while you try and find that, I think I'll just quickly mention this. When I look at I currently have their lineup pulled up on my screen. When I'm looking at this lineup, I think where he's going to slide in is an interesting topic to me because obviously that first line for Edmonton kind of stayed pretty similar the entire season, if I remember correctly. Connor McDavid, Hyman, and Kane. That's what I always thought it was, right? I think it'd be interesting to see whether the Oilers try and slide Connor Brown up there with Connor McDavid to see if they can kind of maybe try and get a spark out of him. Obviously, we've seen them do that in the past with certain players. And McDavid has a habit of elevating players. So, I mean, I think it could be an interesting idea and definitely something I want to talk about. Whether you would put Connor Brown on a line with McDavid in this upcoming season. Or whether you just want to keep playing safe.
Well, I think that's why, like, you can't have made that move and not have that be your intention, right? Because that's what everybody talks about after this deal. It's like, oh, he's reuniting with McDavid, his old line mate, the two Connors, whatever. It's the same kind of talk everybody has. And this may be my anti-Oilers bias here as a Flames fan, but you just get the sense that every move that the Oilers make is just overpraised just a little, just an annoying amount. Where I've not heard too much negativity about this Connor Brown deal. Everybody's talking about how great it will be to reunite him with Connor McDavid. You hear all the stories about McDavid reaching out to Connor Brown to get him to sign in Edmonton. And it just feels like one of those things that they're going to try to reunite him on the same line. And because is Connor Brown as good of a player as Evander Kane is? I wouldn't say so. So it just feels like the kind of thing that's a little bit overblown. Sure, you can hope for the chemistry to come back, and I think that's what they're betting on. So they'll definitely put him on a line. I just don't know if it'll show any improvement to actually put him on that line. So will they try it? Absolutely. Like maybe first 20-25 games, but will it stick? Who knows, right? I don't know if he's a first line type player at this point in his career. Also, in terms of contract number, they paid him 1 year, which feels good because we don't even know how healthy he's going to be coming back from an ACL injury. But
True.
$4 million is the number.
Well, from what I'm looking at right now, it looks like that's what it could be with performance bonuses. Is that right? That's what I have in front of me. I don't know if that's right or not. But if you're right on that with with it being just completely $4 million, that's an overpay, and I agree with you on that. But if what I'm reading right now, which is why I want to make sure, let's figure out who's right on this.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, because I'm not sure. I don't know how correct this source I have on this. I wish I pulled this up prior, but what I have is 1 year, 7.75, which is going towards their cap hit with up to $4 million in performance bonuses. So if he plays up to that level that they're hoping of him, he'll get $4 million. But obviously with less risk, because if he doesn't, 7.75, who cares, right? That's not bad.
Okay, yeah.
700,000, nobody's crying.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing the same thing. No, I agree. That makes
Okay.
makes it a lot easier to swallow.
Yeah, for sure, and that's which is why I was actually going into that. I was going to disagree with you because I actually think that there isn't a reason to not give praise to a contract like this. Because again, I'm going to say this 1,000 times in this segment: low risk, high reward. He's the type of guy who never really hit that ceiling that everybody expected of him, and now he has the opportunity to play against the best player in the world, who has a history of elevating players to career years, and we'll have to see if he can do that with Connor Brown. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm actually kind of a little, even though Flames fan as well, I'm definitely excited to see how this turns out for them. I've been not a huge fan of Connor Brown, but I've definitely followed him throughout his career. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they can do with him. I think if he slides in that spot that Evander Kane had previously been in, I feel like with the player that he is, that we've seen in the past in the NHL, I think that he's not at that level, but we've seen McDavid do bigger things with worse. I can definitely tell you that. So
Yeah, I just it doesn't feel like the upgrade that everybody says it is. I'm looking at, so I looked up when I was looking up the contract to double check um, the cap hit. The first article that comes up, let me read you this headline. A stroke of genius. Edmonton Oilers GM Ken Hollins gets high praise for free agent action. Like come on.
So who's this from though?
Oh, it's the Edmonton. It's the Edmonton Journal. So it's
okay.
So it's
okay. That's what I figured.
Of course, it's Edmonton-based media.
Okay.
But like that's kind of the same thing that I've been hearing everywhere. It's not the thing that's gonna change the Oilers, right? Like,
and I don't disagree with you. I think it's just another filler guy to put in that first line at the end of the day. But all I'm saying is that I think it's a great deal. I have no issues with it. I personally would give it a pretty high grade, and I'm sure I will in a minute. But I would not give that kind of praise, obviously, because it's obviously that type of headline is pampered towards a certain audience. I don't think I have to tell you that. But yeah, I personally have no issue with it.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it. I more have an issue with the response to it. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like, from the purely player side of it, it just doesn't feel like it moves the needle. Like it could, if everything pans out, and I think that's where, looking at the further details of the contract, like I do think that's where the value comes in, and I do think it's a good contract, and a good signing, especially considering how much of it is performance bonuses. I just don't think, taking out all variants, I don't think it's going to move the needle too much. And to be frank, Edmonton kind of needs to move the needle, because it's year after year of disappointment after disappointment. They need to make moves now. There's a reason Vegas won the Stanley Cup. They made moves.
Yeah.
They got stars. And if you can't support Connor McDavid with those kind of players, like, why didn't, like, I don't have Edmonton's cap number at the forefront of my head, so it may not have been possible. But for, like, potentially up to $4 million for Connor Brown, could you have not spent that money on Ryan O'Reilly? Were you not in the conversation for that? It just doesn't feel like it. It just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, that.
I don't know. I could be talking out of my butt on that one. It just feels like they have to make some sort of bigger moves, and it feels like they're going for more of a good story than a good hockey team at a certain point.
To give you an update on their cap space, they had 5.6, which I'm not sure if this is before or after the signing.
Which is like
so,
like 18 million.
Oh, it is after.
Okay.
It is after the signing. They do have him on here.
So let's say they don't make that signing, then you have more cap space. 18 million over 4 years is $4.5 million per year. They had enough to get that done. Like,
yep.
That's what I'm saying, right? It just feels like this kind of mediocre, like ceiling-based move that everybody's praising, when in reality, I think it's going to lead to just another second-round exit for them. It's not a bad contract. Like, I think the actual contract itself is well done. I just think they could have gone for a better player. If I was going to give it, like, a grade, I think I'd give it a B. Because it just does, like perfectly average. It just doesn't move me either way. I think that the player is fine. I think the terms of the contract are pretty good. I just think I need more from the Oilers at this point.
Yep, and I definitely don't disagree with you. I can definitely say, like I've mentioned throughout this entire one, that I'm definitely on the side that it's a pretty good deal. But I was even going to say, before you said that, I also had B. Because based on what we've said for all the moves previously, or at least what I've said, I don't think it's good enough to give him a B plus and put him on the same side as Ryan O'Reilly. It's definitely not that good of a deal, but I still think it's a great contract. It's a great deal. It's a nice move, bringing in a former teammate for your star. I mean, you see these trades all over the NHL, no matter what team it is. When you have a big player like that, it's a pretty common place in every sport. I personally like it. I still would give it a B because, like you said, the upside isn't really there. They kind of needed a bigger guy. Who knows if they were in on O'Reilly? Who knows, right? So who knows? That's all I'm saying with that. But obviously, I think the upside, the biggest upside, is that he ends up being like maybe a 30-goal scorer next to McDavid, which you can say all you want, the low chance of that happening, but we've seen it happen before. Think about like Patrick Maroon. You wouldn't think of him as a 30-goal scorer, would you?
Yeah.
But and then you have another, and then you're just making your second line better, having Kane down there. Like overall, the upside is there for a big move. Is it enough to get them over the hump? Probably not. So I don't disagree. But either way, we've talked about this too much already. We should move on. Max Pacioretty to the Washington Capitals. What do you think on that one?
That one feels like an awesome deal to me. This is probably one of my favorites. I would have to say I'd have to double check the cap number on that, but it again, like you've said it a lot, but the low risk, high reward. I don't think any player encapsulates that's more. I don't think any player encapsulates that more than Max Pacioretty, because.
And do you have the number on him? I keep asking that.
Yeah, I don't.
I should pull.
I do not
have
the number. I do not. I do now. I do now.
You do?
1 year, $2 million deal, with another $2 million available in bonuses.
That is a good one.
It's a good deal. Like, obviously injury concern, right? Like Achilles is the worst sports injury you can have. No question. So there is concern that he'll ever be able to get back to that place again. But if he does, then you are getting yourself a star player, who has a higher ceiling than I think any of these guys that we've talked about before. Debatably Ryan O'Reilly, but I don't know. It's debatable. It's debatable. It's debatable. Yeah. But it's also cheaper, right? It's also cheaper and for shorter term, just in case it doesn't work out, which both are things that I like. I don't like. The team fit is not as intriguing to me. Washington feels like Nashville light in a way, to where they're an aging core. The only difference is they haven't fully gone fire sale mode yet. So like they technically still could contend.
I think the biggest difference between Nashville and the Capitals is the fact that the Capitals still have their aging stars.
Yeah,
that's the biggest difference when I look at that.
That's what I mean.
Obviously they have more of a reason to contend, I think, is the thing that sticks out to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say like they haven't gone fire sale mode yet. They haven't started shipping off like Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Backstrom. Like they still have their core.
And the thing is, I'm sure they won't.
Yeah,
that's a team that I don't think that can really do that. I personally, if Ovechkin ends his career on any team that isn't the Capitals, I would be incredibly shocked. I think that he's such like that's one of those things that I just can't imagine happening. So if it takes the Capitals being mediocre for the next couple of years, I feel like that's probably more likely than them, like you said, going full fire sale.
Yeah. And like looking at this whole roster, like I completely agree. It's a much different it's different from the Preds in the way that you can look at this roster, at least on the offensive side, and still be like, okay, like that. This is something I can work with. Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Tom Wilson, Pacioretty, Backstrom, TJ Oshie, Sonny Milano, who's underrated, Dylan Strome, Anthony Mantha. Like I can go down 3 lines deep and be relatively confident, in at least the experience that they have. Getting older again, not as good as in their heyday, but like I can be more confident with that than Nashville's 1 line deep team. Defense, other than John Carlson, it's looking kind of rough, but still, it's definitely more of like I can respect this push for contention a little bit more. I don't think they're gonna win, but I can respect the effort a lot more than I can Nashville, because in Nashville it feels like you were doing everything right. You were getting so much draft capital. Why are you backtracking on it now? With Washington, it's like, okay, I understand going all in for 1 more year, and then maybe after that you can trade off Kuznetsov and Backstrom. And I agree. I don't think Ovi's gonna ever wear another uniform, but like it makes a little bit more sense in this case. I'm a little bit more on board with the fit here than I was in Nashville.
Yep, and preaching to the choir on that one, I definitely agree with you. I think that this is the type of move that I'm not surprised to see the Capitals making. Obviously, it's a little bit more shocking to see Nashville make the move they did, but they did it. It is what it is. I still don't think it's a bad deal for. They got a pretty good bang for their buck with the guy they got for the number they got him on at. And you can obviously say the same thing about the Capitals. Obviously, you've already mentioned how big of a fan you are of this move. What rating would you give it?
I would probably give it like, I'm trying to keep track in my head of what I've already given other deals just to have a comparison point. It's another one where I'm like flirting with an A minus, but I'm probably gonna lean to another A. Like I don't think it's an A plus deal yet. Like if this was like Pacioretty going to like Carolina or some team, that I think
Yeah.
that would be an A plus immediately. But to the Capitals, it's like I think I'd give it a solid A. Like it makes sense. It's not the best fit in the world, but it makes sense. And you're getting a player who has the opportunity to be like something truly special. So that's why I would get an A from me.
I was gonna give it an A too, but because I don't want to be the same, I think I'll actually give this one an A plus. For the only reason I would do that is because obviously you mentioned the fact that if he had gone to Carolina, you'd give it an A plus. I would definitely do the same. I think it's even an A plus here. It's just such a God. I keep using this phrase: low risk, high reward. It's perfect. It's the perfect contract that you could possibly have for a veteran player, even if he's coming off an injury. There's no risk to it. 2 million. Who even cares at that point? And like, you know what I mean. It's just, it's such a great deal. I definitely would give it an A plus. That is definitely the type of deal you want to make when you're trying to contend. Obviously, it's not the best team in the world to be doing it, arguably, but it's exactly what I'd expect from the Capitals anyway. They're not a team that's obviously going to be looking to get worse. They want to get better. This definitely, I think, pulls them back into contending a little, not top tier, but obviously for like a 7th, 8th spot, maybe even higher. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens. But I definitely could see them making the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
And just to be clear on that, I don't know if I made it clear enough. I said A plus. But anyway, what is next on the list? I scrolled down a little. Jonathan Drouin. And I talked to you, Caleb, about this one a little bit before. I'm personally a really, really big fan of this move because I've always been a pretty big fan of Jonathan Drouin during his career. I thought he was a great player, and I was truly disappointed and sad when he did retire early. Obviously, I don't remember the exact reason off the top of my head. I believe it was mental health related, so obviously get better, come back. That's awesome for him. And it's awesome to see another team giving him a chance because I think that he's one of those guys who really has the potential. This is a move that next year we could potentially be talking about him next offseason making a real big deal if this works out. Or a lot of money, sorry, if this works out for Colorado. Because when I think of Drouin, I think of a really, really skilled forward. And if he can get back to the place that he obviously retired at, we could potentially see Colorado be an incredible team next year.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot more sense because there's a lot of these signings have parallels, right? This feels a little bit of a parallel to the Connor Brown move for me. This feels like what the Connor Brown move should have been. It's the same kind of like you're buying in on a guy who has an insanely high ceiling to try and put your already championship caliber roster over the top. Now, the difference between Edmonton and Colorado is that I think Colorado we know that they already have the roster that can support a championship. And so Jonathan Drouin has a pretty big safety net. In Connor Brown's case, there's already so much pressure that's built up for Edmonton to win a championship, and they've already underwhelmed the expectations they had, that there's so much pressure on him that I feel like it's almost harder for him to live up to this the potential $4 million contract, right? That's what I think is different about Jonathan Drouin, because Colorado, if he flames out in Colorado, I don't think it's as big of a deal for the team as it would be if Connor Brown flames out in Edmonton, right? Like Colorado would
No.
be fine without Druin, if he doesn't work. They'd be exceptional with him. Edmonton, if Connor Brown works out, would be also exceptional with him. But they're kind of, I think they're kind of screwed if they don't have him because they've otherwise been so stagnant, right? And they need to make moves. Colorado, I don't feel like needs to as much. So this is I think a better move for a team that can be okay with treading water a little bit.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you completely. I think this is a very similar to the Connor Brown move for obviously a couple of reasons. There are two players who are both, we've seen the talent, we've seen them show that they can be that kind of player, it's just they haven't done it yet. So I think it's a great move for Colorado. Like I said earlier, I obviously not quite to the same level as the Edmonton Journal with the praise, but I did praise that move as well. I praise this one for a lot of the same reasons. I think it's just a great move. I think there's a lot of upside here because obviously I think that Nathan McKinnon is by far the best player that Jonathan Drouin would have ever played with, especially if I don't see him playing on the same line as McKinnon. I don't think that that's the type of thing that Colorado would be looking for. Maybe if he can prove it, but he definitely won't start there. We'll have to see what happens with that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree with me. That's up to you. But I don't personally see it being the same situation as Connor Brown immediately probably sliding up on that first line side. I don't really see that happening. We'll see.
Yeah, I think
that's just my opinion.
I think that's the difference in between these two trades, right? Is that you can say like, oh, like I don't see him immediately sliding in next to McKinnon, and I can like shake my head and be like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. Whereas like if you say, do you like, oh, I don't think Connor Brown will immediately go on the first line against McDavid, like you're kind of like, but that's kind of what he was brought there to do. Like you see, do you see the difference in urgency there? That's kind of the nuance in that deal that has the difference for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly, that's a big reason actually that, because obviously we still have a lot of lists to go. I don't know if you've seen that, Caleb. I think we should probably speed up a little bit here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go straight to grade. I think that this move right here is probably going to be another A to A+. Probably A. I don't think it's quite as good of a trade as the Max Pacioretty to the Cap, or not trade. I keep saying that, trade. Signing. I don't think it's quite as good of a signing. I think it's still a great signing for Colorado. I think they're going to definitely be able to do a lot with him. I think they're one of those teams that really gives Drouin a chance to stick out and potentially have a bounce back season, which I would love to see personally. I think that this, if he does bounce back, Colorado could be looking at another cup again because holy, that team will be stacked. And yeah, that's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, I think I'd go maybe not quite that high, because it is another one of those things like if it doesn't work out, it moves the needle so little. But I definitely like it better than Edmonton's case, and I gave that move a B. I'm gonna give this one like a very high B+. It's definitely like it's on the edge of being an A range. I just think the chance of it flaming out is a little bit too high for me to give it an A, but it's definitely like a smart, savvy move that I agree with completely.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Do you want to do Shane Gostabir? Did I say that right? I keep forgetting. Do you know if that's right?
Yep.
On the pronunciation? Yeah, did I say that right? Okay, cool. I for some reason I'm doubting myself on that one. But anyway, it's Detroit bringing in another defenseman to play probably next to Seider. We'll have to see what happens with that and how they want to use him. This is another move. I should just pull up a sheet with all the numbers on it. But I do not know how much they're paying him. I'm going to check that now. But depending on what that number ends up being, I think it's a pretty good move for them.
A little over $4 million. A little over $4 million.
Perfect. That's a great deal. Yeah, I definitely think it's a good deal for them. Because obviously they're a young team that's potentially trying to move into contending. I think that's no issue with that. It's a great deal.
I don't have too much of an issue with it, like, in a vacuum. But I'm just, like, concerned with what's happening in Detroit in general. I had so much trust in the Iser plan, and it's kind of starting to fall apart. Like, we're not gonna go into it fully, obviously, but that, like, they signed JT Confer for I think like five. I think it was like a it might have been a 5x5. Don't quote me on it, but it was.
I didn't hear about
It
that.
was an insane amount of money, and it's like these are the kind of like players you do not want to take on for that much money and that much term for a young team. Like, I don't know. It feels like Detroit is the kind of team that needs more. It just needs to continue to grow how it's already been grown through the draft, through getting good young players like that. They like Moritz Seider, like Lucas Graymond. That's how you grow a team like Detroit. And the JT Confer move especially, I am just like wincing at that. I don't really know what they're doing. And Gostisbehere, for me, I haven't followed too closely, but it was a lot of hype early in his career, and it's kind of fizzled out recently. True. It feels like a little bit more of a pet project, and it just feels like Iserman's reached a point where he's accrued all these good young players, and he just can't quite figure out what to do to get them over the hump. Like, I feel like you need a little bit more of a big move than Gostisbehere. It is only a 1-year deal, so it's not that big of a risk. But I don't know. It just feels like I don't know. It feels like a little bit underwhelming. There were so many other moves that Detroit had made in the past couple of years that I was like excited for, and this year I'm starting to just like fade on that a little bit. Like, I was thinking maybe they'd be contending for a cup in the next like 2 years, but I don't know anymore. In a vacuum, this deal is like okay, but it feels like a little bit too much money for a player who, as of recently, hasn't quite proven himself. So if we want to like speed it up a little bit, I'd probably give it like similar to Connor Brown. I'd say a B. It just doesn't feel like it's all that impactful. It feels like one of those signings that you're gonna forget has happened come next July 1st.
Yeah, and the worst part, once again, I agree with you. I was thinking of B as well. But anyway, I definitely agree with a lot of things that you said there. I think I don't have too much to say on it. I think it's a good deal, like you said, in a vacuum. $4 million for a type of player like him is not bad at all. That's definitely the type of money he was going to make. I have no issue with it, but obviously I won't repeat all the things you just said. We can move on. I would give it a B as well. Next up, we have an interesting one to me. Korpisalo to the Ottawa Senators.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think on that one?
I think I want to pull up the numbers because I know it's a long long deal. I'm gonna hold my.
I believe I saw it earlier. I think it's 4 years, $20 million, but I will double check.
Okay, so like a 4x5 kind of thing. That feels.
Oh no. 5 years, $20 million. So it's a $4 million.
So okay. So it's the kind of deal that could be. It's really tough because this could be a deal that like sinks this team. Like, not sinks this team. That's a little dramatic. This could be a deal that's like.
Yeah, that might be.
It's a little dramatic. That's a little dramatic. But it could be the deal that they're kind of like saddled with for a while if he doesn't flame up, because that's a long-term deal. That's and $4 million. Well, it's not like it's not a huge anchor. It's also not the most insignificant thing in the world, right? But if it pans out, then this is an awesome deal for Ottawa. It's a thing where it's like it could really go either way, but they're banking on it long term, and with goalies, I feel like you can just roll the dice, really, right? Like, this could be the greatest. This could be the greatest thing to ever happen to that organization, or it could just be hey, we have $4 million less dollars in cap space the next few years. Like, it's really tough to determine because free agent goalies coming in, it's impossible to tell how they're going to do, I feel like.
Yep, and I was about to touch on that, actually. The thing that I wanted to point out was just the fact that you just can't trust a goalie deal anymore. which makes grading a deal like this so hard. Because for all we know, he could turn into Patrick Waugh next year, or he could turn into, who even knows, AHL goaltender backup. You never know, right? Like, and obviously that's the scary thing about paying goaltenders so much for so long. $4 million, nothing that bad, but it's still going to burn a hole in your pocket, and we'll have to see what Ottawa does about that. Obviously we've seen a couple teams in recent years win with goalies who have not necessarily been stars. Obviously, this year is an example of that, Aiden Hill. But I still think that when I think of like an elite team, I still think of a team that has that elite goaltender. And for a team like Ottawa that's looking to contend potentially for a cup, I just don't see Korpisalo being that guy, which is the issue that I have with it, I think. With being the fact that you have a young team here that wants to win, right? Very, very soon. They want to win now. And you're paying Korpisalo for 4 years, which if he can elevate his game to that level and bring them there, perfect. I'm wrong. I have no issue being wrong. But that's the doubt that I kind of have there, I think. Because when I look up at a line like this, or a team like this, I think that they should be potentially looking to bring in a bigger guy. Obviously, we spoke about Hellebuck in the first week, in first episode, whatever you want to call it. I think that Hellebuck would have been a bit of a better fit for a team like this. Obviously, again, we'd probably have to take a peek if they could even afford him. But I feel like that would have been a move that I would have rather see Ottawa go for. I would have rather seen them go all in. But I don't hate it either. It's not a lot of money, not the end of the world, whatever, what have you, right?
Yeah, I disagree slightly. I just, you talk about bringing in a bigger guy like Hellebuck. I just could see how easily that could blow up in their faces. That is my one concern. This is why I kind of like this deal. I think a lot more than maybe I should, just because I'm kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. You think Ottawa should bring in a little bit of a bigger goalie. I feel like this is the perfect kind of like project to where he could become that bigger goalie, right? Like he's on the his stats from last year are pretty good. So he had a 913 save percentage in the season with Columbus, and then when he moved to Los Angeles, he had a 921. Like, those are good numbers, right? Like, this isn't. Yeah. It's not like you're putting a flyer on a guy who's just shown some potential. Like, he's posted it for like a season or two. So there's something there. I think if this were like $1 million and a half per year cheaper, I would be like high A's range for this. Like, it would feel like the awesome, like the best kind of deal to put Ottawa over the top. But as it is, I'm feeling like a B plus, just because it feels like the ceiling for this one is so high that this could be a move we're talking about and being like, this is what got Ottawa to a Stanley Cup. And if that happens, then it's a steal. Then it's like an absolute steal. And I do think like that the floor is low, but I think if it doesn't work out, you're gonna be strapped, but it's not gonna be as bad if you pay like Hellebuck 5 years, $8 million, and he flops. It's not quite as big of a risk, and I think I do like that. I think it's a little bit. I just think it's a little bit pricey for me. My biggest issue is with the amount of money they're paying him and for how long, not the player or the fit, because I think both are pretty good.
I'm so happy we finally disagree on one of these. It was annoying me that we kept ending up at the same road. So I'm happy to say that I'm going to stick with my guns on this one. I still think that Hellebuck would have been better. I don't disagree, though, completely with what you're saying. I think there's a lot of very good points there because, obviously, like you said, the upside is there. I think that out of all the moves, and this might be controversial to say, considering all of the moves we've talked about having high upside, low risk, out of all the moves we've talked about, this probably has the most risk, which is where I have the biggest issue. Which is why I'm going to give it this rating. I'm going to say B-. I don't think and that's not me necessarily calling it I guess it is me calling it the worst move so far, but I don't want to emphasize too much on that because I still think it's a very good move for them. I just don't. I wish they did more. You know what I mean? Because what I just feel like you bring in a guy like Hellebuck,
Yeah.
and it works out.
But that's a
Ooh,
but if it works
that would've
out
been a sexy team.
is a bigger if than you might think, even for a guy like Hellebuck, right?
Oh, I know, but it's just thinking about that.
To play to your side too, the other thing about Corpusalo, just before we end it, is that like he does have to stay healthy. He has a lot of injury concerns, and that would be another thing to be like, may not work out, may be a waste of a few million, but at the same time,
And just to be clear, I love this Ottawa team. I love how young it is. I love the potential they have. I hope it works out. Just personally, that's all I'm saying is that I think they could have done more. And that's all I'm trying to say with that. Do you wanna move on? Do you wanna go? We've got 2 more here. Do you wanna run through them?
Sure. I think these can be done really quickly. Like I don't have a lot to say about either of these, but yeah.
Okay, so obviously, first one, Cam Talbot to the LA Kings. This is one where it's clearly just replacing Korpisalo. This is clearly a guy who's probably gonna slide. I don't know if he's necessarily gonna slide in and start. They still have Phoenix Copley, I believe.
Yep.
Yep. And anyway, that's a pretty solid goaltending duo right there. Cam Talbot can still carry his weight. He's still a pretty serviceable goaltender. Not a lot that I think we can really say about it. It's just one of those moves. You're either bringing in a backup or you're bringing in a guy who can, give you 40 games and you'll be fine.
This is such like a nothing deal. It's a 35-year-old goalie that's going to play out the end of his career as a backup in LA. Meh. I don't know.
Yep.
Like
I don't have the number on it. I'm going to take a wild guess that it's very low.
Yeah, 1 year, 1 million. Meh.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What I figured. Yeah, meh. Could have got better. Could have got worse.
It's the same thing. Like
I have no issue with it. It's hard to even give a grade to. I'd probably just give it a B.
Yeah, like
or no, B minus.
I'd give it a B just because B feels like my very like average point.
Okay.
I don't think
Sure. I'll meet you on B.
They haven't gotten any better or worse because of this.
No. Well, I feel like they might have gotten a little worse losing Korpisalo, but he's definitely not as good as Korpisalo.
He's definitely
you can't even make the argument. Page as Korpisalo.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I just like it's just it's an insurance policy kind of deal. Like it's something they had to do to band-aid Korpisalo leaving, and sure, they'd get a little bit worse, but it's also still a backup goalie. The only way this can get worse is if Copley like flames out, which
that's the one thing
which could definitely happen. So maybe I should care about this deal more than I do, but as of right now, it's just like when you lose they're not gonna pay Korpisalo as much as Ottawa did, so it's kind of just what they had to do.
Yep, and I completely agree with you. I think we're both on the same page on that one. B range. It's nothing impressive, nothing bad. It's just a guy you're sliding in. Anyway, we can move on. Final guy, Laurent Brossoit. Think I got that. Do you know if that's right?
Yep, that is
killing it with names today.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that is who the Winnipeg Jets are planning to replace Connor Hellebuck with, if they do end up moving him, which obviously not leaning towards moving him. We talked about that already. We don't need to go more into the Hellebuck, I'm sure. I think we talked about that enough in that 40-minute segment I think we had on it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I think this is a pretty good move for the Winnipeg, all things considered. Obviously, you're going to get a downgrade no matter what, losing Hellebuck, but I don't necessarily think you're trying to bring in a guy who is as good as Hellebuck. When I look at Winnipeg, I'm looking at a team that I don't think they're trying to contend now.
No, they're on their way out. This is like
okay.
This is a. I think this is quite a steal. It's one year, $1.75 million, and Brossoit played really well in the playoffs for Vegas last year until he got hurt, right?
Yep.
Obviously, Aiden Hill took over and won the Stanley Cup for them, but Bressois was playing really well into the second round against the Oilers. Like this feels like um, if Hallebuck leaves, it's gonna leave a huge hole in the in the Winnipeg team, right? Obviously, but with Bressois, it doesn't
Yeah.
feel as bad, and you're saving yourself a lot of money. It just feels like the perfect kind of transition move um, to where the Jets are going to be the next few years, which is probably like near the bottom of the league standings, and um, I think that's okay for where they are now. They're not going to contend, and I think they're starting to realize that. And Bressois feels like the perfect kind of goalie to pull them through that. Like, it's a good signing. Like it's a signing I really like.
Yep, and I agree with you completely. I think that obviously it's a pretty great deal. I usually have an issue with signing players off of a playoff performance just because obviously they're going to be elevating their game, and which is why I just kind of disagree with it in general. I don't think it's a good way to measure a player's overall skill. But when you're getting him for 1.7, no, not a lot of risk there. I think, and I have no issue with Brossois as well. I think he's a great goaltender. I think he's going to be a great replacement for Hellebuck. And yeah, I can definitely say this one's. I like this one a lot more than the Cam Talbot pickup. I can definitely say that. Obviously, we have them right next to each other, so I don't want to compare it too much. But I think it's a great pickup for Winnipeg. I'd probably give it a B plus.
Yeah,
Nothing crazy.
I'd go in.
Obviously,
Yeah,
sorry.
no,
Go
I'd
ahead.
I'd, I'd go in the same range. I'd say like A minus, just because of
Yeah.
I completely agree with what you're saying. Like signing players off playoff performances is risky, but I think the fact that he got injured balances it out a little bit because it's not like his number is
True.
inflated at all. Like this still feels like a little bit of a steal, for the price that they got him at. I do wish it was
Yeah.
I wish it was a little bit better of a team that got him, for his sake, but no, I think it's a good deal.
True. Yep, and that's the thing about this 1 year contract. I think this is an opportunity on both sides for Brossois to obviously have a bit of a breakout year with Winnipeg, which I'm sure is what he's aiming for, and then going to free agency next year, trying to get a bit of a bigger deal, obviously, on a probably a contender, and we'll have to see how that works out for him and Winnipeg. But yeah, I do not disagree with the name minus at all. I think it's totally in that range. It's not a lot of risk at 1.7. It's not the end of the world if he, falls off or whatever, what have you. Goaltender signings, we've talked about that enough. But there's not a lot of risk here. There's quite a bit of reward. He's a very skilled goaltender, and we'll have to see what happens with that.
For sure. So, I don't know if you've heard, Simon, but in recent NHL news, someone Johan Franzen called a terrible man, the worst person I've ever met, has recently been hired as the new Columbus Blue Jackets head coach. That is Mike Babcock, who had obviously a lot of success in Detroit, was hired as kind of the savior of the franchise in Toronto, and then everything kind of fell apart when it was revealed about how toxic the work environment was around Babcock and how tightly he ran his team and how awful he was to some of the players over there. But it seems that Columbus is giving him a second chance. What do you think of this move, Simon? And do you think he is a good fit in Columbus?
I think it's interesting. I think it's very, very interesting because there is a part of me that wants to say I like it because there is a part of me that does like it. I think it's a really interesting move that I think there's going to be a lot of people talking about over the next couple of months because it's definitely controversial. It definitely falls on how strong you are or how big you are in that style of coaching because we've kind of seen that fade out of the NHL slowly. We've seen like the tough coaching we've seen throughout all of history not quite work as well. Babcock, obviously, I don't have to tell you about his style. It falls on the tough side. And I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I feel almost weird giving an opinion on it before we see what happens because I feel like there is potential there for him to succeed because I do think Babcock's a good coach. I think that you can't sit right here and tell me that he wasn't a good coach in Detroit. It worked. Back then it worked. It's just, we're talking about, this is a decade later now. Can hit that style of coaching still work in the NHL? I personally think it can. We'll have to see if it does. I have a hard time giving a prediction though, because obviously the only thing that I can think of potentially being an issue, we've seen how Johnny Gaudreau kind of struggles under that coaching. We've seen that obviously with the Flames. That's the biggest thing that sticks out to me. Patrick Laine, it's another guy who doesn't really like hard coaching. If history, my brain's remembering right. Anyway, I think it's very interesting. I've said that a ton. I'll let you take over from there, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a fully developed opinion yet, I don't think.
And I don't really think it's possible to have a fully developed opinion at this point. Like, I think you're right. Because I think a lot of it also depends on how much Babcock has changed. Because in his opening press conference, right, he's waxing poetic about how, like, his daughter has helped him change his coaching style. And, like, saying how he's adjusted his tone and realizing some of his mistakes from his past coaching stints. And you just have to, like... it's hard to know how much of that is real and how much of that is him posturing to get a job again. Because I think I don't think, like, you say this kind of style works, but there's a line between hard coaching and, like, verbal abuse, and Mike Babcock has definitely fallen on the side of verbal abuse more often than he should.
For sure.
And I think rightfully so, players, especially today, don't take that anymore. And I don't think they should. I don't think they should have to, because, like, that's there's a difference. There's a difference between motivating your guys to work hard and kind of playing a hardline style and doing some of the stuff that Babcock did. Like, I know one of the famous examples of him is in Mitch Marner's rookie year, where he had to rank his teammates in order of work ethic, and then he had to share that list with the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Like, that's awful stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just like stuff like that feels like a bygone era at this point. And I like your point about Columbus maybe not being the best venue for that to happen in, with the kind of players and personnel, and especially the fact that it's a younger team. I don't know. I it's more of a personal anecdote. It is, because to your point, it did work in Detroit. Like, he has the success to prove it, but I just don't know how much that can continue to work in today's game, especially with a young team that he has like Columbus. Because if he's going to coach exactly the same way, I don't think it'll be successful, either from a lack of player buy-in because they feel like they're just dealing with too much, or from another big public, like, outing of his behavior like he had in Toronto, right? It is tricky to predict, and I think a lot of it just depends on Mike Babcock's personal journey and whether he's actually made a change in his style or not.
Yep, and I completely agree with you. I think after putting a little bit more thought into it while you're saying all that, I just thought about, like, my own personal experience, obviously not in the NHL. I hope I do not have to say that. Obviously not as high level as this, but I can definitely say that it is hard working with those types of coaches, because by having that sort of environment, you're having almost a wall between the coaching staff and the players. And in some cases it works. In some cases, when you can build that fear of the head coach that we've seen work in the past, it works. And there's sometimes when you completely lose the locker room and everything goes to hell, which is what has happened to Babcock. It happened in Toronto. It's happened in other places. Like, it's what always happens. These types of coaches have a shelf life. That's the thing that constantly gets repeated, right? It's how long can you create that fear without just that fear becoming hatred, which is where, obviously, I think the Blue Jackets are bringing him in the hope that they have a lot of talent on this roster. Obviously, they just got Fantinelli. I think that's right. I don't know why I don't remember. Yeah, they got Fantinelli. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, they're bringing in a couple of young guys. I think they're hoping Babcock can hopefully get obviously they signed him to a 2-year contract. I noticed that. I think that's a smart decision by Columbus. I'd be surprised if he came back after that. I think they're trying to hold on to the short-term success that Babcock can potentially bring them, I would be very shocked if it becomes long term with a coach like him. So, just for a little bit of context, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, whenever something big like this happens in sports, I think the biggest thing that gets asked is, where were you? I can say that it was, June 21st, I believe it was. And I remember I was getting ready for bed. And I get a text from my dad just saying that Domingo Germain, I believe is how you say his name, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, was about to complete a perfect game. And how in my dad's entire life, he had never once seen this. And I just turned it on my phone and watched the last 3 innings and got to witness the 24th perfect game in MLB history. It was a very, very cool experience. I can definitely say that. And Caleb, you said you weren't lucky enough to catch it, but I think we can both speak to how incredible it is to see another one of these. Obviously, the last one was in 2012 by Felix Hernandez, I believe. Yep. Obviously, just an incredible, incredible thing to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. For me, something that I always compare stuff like this against, I'm going to give another... I've already given him a shout-out in one of our past podcasts, but John Boyce has a series on Dave Steve, the pitcher, for the Blue Jays, and his quest to get just a no-hitter, and how he was a starting pitcher for so many years in the majors and one of the top ones in the game, and he came so close to getting a no-hitter on multiple occasions and was never able to quite reach that mountaintop. So to see someone get not just a no-hitter but a perfect game, it's incredible, especially since it's been an 11-year wait since the last one.
Yep, for sure. And obviously, it takes an insane amount of skill, and I do not want to take away from that, but it also takes just an absolutely bonkers amount of luck, which you kind of hit on there by just, obviously, you have to get so lucky. I mean, even in this one, I don't remember if it was the 7th or 8th inning, so you're going to have to forgive me on that. But all I remember, the biggest thing, I remember there was 2 batters straight that went to a 3-2 count. And I am, just to be clear, Blue Jays fan, hate the Yankees, have never cheered for the Yankees more in my life watching this game. But I was crapping my pants. I can fully tell you that, because it was terrifying. Because obviously, one pitch goes sour in either of those 2 at-bats, all gone. You just need such a perfect amount, it needs to be a perfect storm for something like this to happen. Which is why it's just, I'm so happy I got to see it live. I'm so happy it happened. And, yeah, it's just so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's a reason they call it a perfect game. It literally needs everything to break right for you. So there's a reason we haven't seen it for as long as we have, and there's a reason there's such a limited number of them that have even happened in the majors. And even the things that would normally dilute the importance of this, like the fact that it's the Yankees versus the A's, and considering how bad the A's are, if you're nitpicking, you can be like, oh, it's a little bit lessened because of how bad the team he's playing is. But honestly, it isn't, just because of how big of an achievement this is. No matter what team you're playing, as long as it's another MLB team, a perfect game is one of the biggest achievements in sports, and it's one that only a handful of players are able to claim for their entire careers. And so the fact that Domingo Germain, who is not an all-star pitcher by any chance, 5-5 on the year, and I don't think his stats are he entered the game with a 5.10 ERA, which is not great. He only had 1 complete game before in his professional career, no career shutouts, and obviously those he both eclipsed for the first time. It is a lot of luck, right? Because Domingo Germain is not an all-star guy. He's just another starting pitcher for the Yankees. But it's still incredible to see. And I'm sure incredible to witness, at least the part of it that you did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And also just another thing to point out how rare of an occasion this was, or this game, or just an accomplishment this was. Another thing, and I'm just reading this now. I do not want to pretend I knew this before, but he also threw what's called a max, which I don't know if you know what that is. Maybe I'm just clueless. And for baseball, I'm not the most knowledgeable person in the world. But he threw a shutout in fewer than 100 pitches, which you might not, which isn't crazy necessarily. It's obviously happened before, but doing that in a perfect game is very, very rare. Like even more rare, obviously. As the last person to do it was. Oh wait, never mind. 2012 as well. Philip Humber, 96 pitches. I didn't wait. There were 2 perfect games in 2012.
There were a lot of perfect games, and I think there was 2, maybe even 3 in 2012.
Really?
Which is crazy.
Oh.
That kind of goes to show.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I knew there.
Right.
I knew there was
Okay.
a lot in 2012. So yeah, there's been 24 perfect games in MLB history. And then we find. Yeah, Domingo Germain was the 24th,
What?
and then yeah, there was 3 in 2012. 3 in 2012, all within a
Wow.
few months of each other. April of
I feel
2012.
like I should have known that.
June of 2012, and then Felix Hernandez in August of 2012, and then not another one for 11 years. It's,
The reason that caught me off guard is because I kind of misread it. Because, like I said, he threw 96 pitches in his. In my head, for some reason, I read that as 1996. But yeah, still an incredible accomplishment by obviously, like you said, not necessarily an all-star pitcher, but like I said, it takes an insane amount of skill and luck. Everything needs to come together just at the right time. And the funny thing is, and I've been seeing this come up every once in a while, he's kind of struggled in his last couple starts since, which is interesting to me at the very least. Just because of the fact that like it really does show you that like the luck, there is such a big luck factor when it comes to this, right?
yeah, no, there definitely is. Like it's, because you can always have one pitch go awry in the 9th inning when your arm is completely dead and there's not much left to play for. Just looking at it, you always wonder. I always wonder about that last guy up to bat for the other team. Like, how bad would you feel if you were the one who broke a perfect game for the other pitcher? Like, do you think
That does remind me actually of watching it. Like it was in Oakland, and the Athletics fans in the crowd were cheering for Jermaine or German. I don't know baseball pronunciations. You're gonna have to forgive me for that. But anyway, they were cheering for him, and I was thinking in my head, like you said, last guy up. Like, do you just let him have it?
yeah,
Like he's gotten that far, right? Like what's?
like you
Like, I was
just
thinking
feel.
that to myself.
I feel like you just feel guilty as the batter at that point, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even because like I said, I was texting with my dad during this, and he pointed out because I pointed out to him that the fans in the crowd were cheering for the Yankees, and he said, "Yeah, of course, it's history." That's what he said to me, and that just kind of sticks out to me because I wonder if the players think about that.
I think they must. Because you really don't want to be the guy who ruins someone's like it's kind of a legacy thing too, right? Because nobody remembers the people
Oh, for sure.
who almost had a perfect game.
Yeah. He just solidified himself on a list that only has 24 names on it.
Yeah.
That's just bonkers. Especially in a sport as old as baseball.
No, it really is. It really is. So in recent NFL news, they've kind of continued with a string of suspensions that's been in line for them in terms of what they've been cracking down on, and that is gambling. As sports betting continues to become more of a thing in both the United States and Canada, it's legalized in more and more places. You're starting to see the NFL crack down on it in terms of their players and what they do or do not want to see, which is really interesting. Just not in terms of the fact that they are cracking down on it, because it makes sense. If you have players betting on the sport that they're in, Obviously, it kind of compromises the integrity of the game. You can see if like a player bets against his own team and doesn't put in as much effort, or if a player bets for his own team. Like, there's a lot of complications that can come with it. The interesting part is and how inconsistent the NFL has been in doling out these suspensions. So where you can see players getting suspensions for domestic violence that are only 1 or 2 games long, and then you have players like Calvin Ridley who place a single bet while in a team facility and they get suspended indefinitely up to a year. So it's definitely an interesting string of suspensions. The most recent ones were 3-game suspensions for, I guess now former Colts cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, and I think also former Colts linebacker Rashad Berry, as well as free agent defensive tackle Demetrius Taylor, and a Titans offensive lineman Nicholas Petit-Frere. The 3 players I mentioned first got a 1-year suspension, while the Titans offensive lineman got a 6-game suspension. What do you think of these suspensions, Simon? Do you think the length of them is justified? And what do you think about the NFL cracking down on it as much as they are now?
I first want to thank you for bringing up something, because I was not thinking about it before you started talking about it, about the idea of like kind of just comparing it to other suspensions, with obviously the example you used, domestic abuse, which we saw last year with Deshaun Watson. I think that's a very, very important thing that needs to be talked about more. I think it is getting talked about quite a bit, but it should be more, I still think. Because I'm very much a believer in the fact that while obviously you meant, like you said, and like everybody else is saying, gambling on the sport that you are a part of, or even in other sports or what have you, as an athlete or a professional athlete, can obviously compromise the integrity of 1,000 different things, and it's obviously not good for the sport, but it's the world we now live in, and it's something that we're going to have to see how all these leagues and all these players adjust to it, and what they